Welcome back to another episode of the Potato Finance Podcast. I'm here with a very special guest today, my good friend Zach Rollins. Zach, how are we doing?
I'm doing good, Josh. How are you?
Good, man. I'm doing good. It's actually really good to see you again. I feel like I haven't seen you in so long. I don't even think I realized it until you got here and we started talking. But what have you been up to these days?
Good question. Well, it's kind of like what I haven't been up to. Which has been a lot of work, a lot of training, and just kind of hustling the way through.
Yeah, just kind of hanging in there, just trying to make that bread.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can say that. Yeah.
So why don't you go into a little bit of detail here about kind of like how we know each other, kind of what you do, just kind of anything miscellaneous you want to share. You have the floor here.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Yeah, we met in, I think it was the first time was in college.
I think so.
Because you were at, because you used to work at the dining hall.
I did.
Right?
That was a while ago, but I did.
A while ago. Throwback.
Some people still recognize me from there.
Do they?
I can't remember. It was recently, like somewhat recently, like maybe last year someone said like, didn't you work in the dining hall or don't you work in the dining hall? I'm like, stop. Actually, the first job I got out of college, the girl that had the cubicle in front of me, she was like, didn't you work in the dining hall? I'm like, this is a joke, right? Like the first job I get out of college, the first job I get away from this place, like someone recognized me. Hey, it's just like I always get pulled back to it.
Popular guy, hey, I
guess, right?
You know, if you're feeding the masses, right?
Yeah, right. Got to make those sandwiches, those wheat wraps or whatever.
The wheat wraps.
Young bucks have these days.
Yep. So, you know, that's kind of, I think, how we first met. And then we have a lot of mutual friends. And then through them, you know, also just going to the gym, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember we'd always just talk gym and, you know, stuff that I was doing. Because it seems like you've always kind of done investing or side hustles or something in the past. And I think that's how we kind of connected. And then also through Ultimate Fitness.
Yeah.
Right? With Josh, Nick Wright and Josh.
Right.
The owner.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, it goes back a while, you know?
Yeah. I feel like, when was the last time I saw you?
I think it was probably in March or April.
During that like awkward, like kind of pause situation, I think that might have been it.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I feel like I've been so busy. I feel like I've just been working so many jobs, doing all these different things. It's just like, sometimes I just lose track of time and I'm like, wait a minute, the summer's already over.
I know, it's August.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Isn't that insane? I'm like, I feel like we haven't even hit the stride yet. Like we had a couple of hot days last week, but I feel like it's been a pretty mild summer to say the least.
Yeah, it's been pretty wet. I mean, being out on the water, you kind of deal with all the weather. And,
yeah.
You know, it's been definitely rainy. But I think August, September, October, even though September is kind of the last month of summer,
right? September
and October seem to be the best months here in Rhode Island, Rhode Island at least.
Is it cold out there on the water in October? I would imagine it's not too warm, right?
You know, the water's really warm. So, because Narragansett Bay is what you call a heat sink.
Right.
So all the water absorbs the ambient heat of the sun. So the water is pretty warm, and typically that means that you're going to actually have warmer temps on the water than you would on land.
Gotcha.
So, but you do get that cool breeze, and come like November, it definitely starts cooling down.
Gotcha.
And then it gets extremely cold on the water.
Right.
There is no hiding it.
I bet. Yeah, I can only imagine. But anyway, the reason I really wanted to have you on, because I wanted to talk about kind of your business that you have and your podcast. So what is your podcast exactly? Because I'm actually really excited to hear about this, because when I found you, when I reached out to you, I don't even think I knew it was you. I think you just came up on Instagram somewhere, and I'm like, that looks like Zach. And I'm like, that is Zach. And I dug a little bit more into it. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a legit thing. I got to get him on here.
Yeah. Well, we try to make it a legit thing, so I appreciate it. And so the podcast, I was living out in Hawaii, and
Were you really?
Yep. Yeah, I lived.
That's something new.
Yeah.
When was that?
Let's see. That was, I graduated college in 2019, left in October. And I was there for about a year, and then COVID hit.
Gotcha.
And then I had to move back because, my job was just annihilated by COVID.
Right.
I was, I got my captain's license. Junior year of college.
Gotcha.
So I was always working on the water.
Right.
Accrued time, over my lifetime, and then got my license. Worked as a captain right away. And then when I graduated college, I was like, you know what? This job that I'm working really isn't for me.
Right.
The job was fun. Just the person I was working with wasn't that great. And so I moved to Hawaii, and I moved to the Big Island of Hawaii with a buddy of mine in college who I didn't really know all that well. We were just kind of like, he sat next to me in class.
Like acquaintances?
Yeah, kind of. And we kind of kept in touch, and he was into like a lot of the entrepreneurial things that I was into.
Right.
So it worked out. And then we moved over there for about a year. And I worked as a captain. I was the lead captain for a charter company, and ran a lot of the crew stuff, ran the boat, guest experience, whole bit. And learned a lot. The lady that I was with had another little startup over there, a little tourism, I guess you could say like a brokerage almost,
Interesting.
So like a lot of tours over there get brokered by certain places.
Gotcha.
So I actually helped build literally the shack itself.
Right.
And, learned a ton about business from her. She was a multi-millionaire.
Oh, wow.
And she liked getting her hands dirty and building shit and being on the boat. So it was really cool to be around that kind of person. And I've been fortunate to kind of be around entrepreneurial people my entire life. So I've gotten to learn a lot about business. And, I kind of took that knowledge and those questions that I always asked, and I wanted to ask it to brands that I knew and loved. So what I did is I created a podcast while I was out there. It was originally called Beyond the Buoy. It's now since been called Along the Keel, because I learned a valuable lesson in trademark, and people that don't necessarily want to have your name or a name similar to it. So
gotcha.
Got a lawyer. His name is Bill. Bill's a great guy.
That kind of happened with Christian Guzman a couple years ago with
Up
Energy in 3D, whatever it was, but he had a similar issue.
Yeah,
I remember.
Come to find out and talking with my lawyer Bill, it's pretty frequent.
I believe it.
Yeah,
because sometimes I'm sure you didn't even think twice about it. Like, this is a great name. Like, I wouldn't have either.
Yeah.
Like for this podcast, the Potato Finance Podcast,
I love that
literally
name.
never looked. I just loved the name. I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm naming it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So I could, in theory, knock on wood.
Yeah.
Get an email tomorrow saying, hey, I'm suing you for everything you have.
It's
quite
possible.
possible.
It's quite
Hopefully
possible.
not likely, but it's possible.
I didn't think it would happen to me, but it did. So, now it's trademarked, it's official, whole kit and caboodle, which in reality doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Because whoever has a bigger wallet is going to win.
Right.
At the end of the day. So anyway, the podcast itself is truly about connecting those who love the ocean with the brands that are surrounding the ocean and the water and the coastal and outdoor lifestyle. So, the idea behind it was to kind of tell the story behind the brand in hopes to kind of build this narrative around the water that, encompasses all things from conservation, education, and storytelling, because so much of the brands that we know and love around the water are truly the people that are actually the stewards of our oceans and stewards of our outdoor environment.
Right.
So that's kind of the gist of the podcast. It's very similar to a podcast that I love and kind of took a few pages out of their book was, let me think, How I Built This by Guy Raz.
Gotcha.
Ever heard of it before?
It sounds familiar, but I can't say I've ever listened to it, but the name does sound pretty familiar.
Great podcast. Would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's on NPR. Great show. Spotify, Apple. You can catch it anywhere you want. And basically took a lot of things from them. Took another out of a page of another book from the Adventurepreneur podcast, Jeremy Jensen, who I actually had him on my show, which is very cool.
Did you?
Yeah,
That's
nice
cool.
guy. And it's kind of where that is, the podcast. And it's growing. It's growing and it's, we're going in different directions. We're starting to work with brands and, part of a TV network now. So Waypoint TV. It's been wild, man.
Now, where do you record these podcasts? Because I've seen pictures of you doing them like on the beach. Do you do them on the beach or on the boat?
We do them anywhere you want.
Really? You do them every... Now, is that tricky? Because I'm guessing you can't always bring like lights out on a boat per se.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to have it's funny, I just had a conversation with someone who's starting a podcast. What I do for the TV network, along with being a part of it, just with the podcast, I also help run the podcast network for them. And we got about 70 plus podcasts now. And, I had this conversation with someone who was, they want to make this very, very highly produced show similar to like a Joe Rogan or NPR or other podcasts, right? Which is all well and good, but a lot of podcasters are more like the indie style, right? So kind of like what you and I are doing.
Yeah.
2 mics, computer, camera.
Yeah, like skeleton operation.
Yeah, exactly. Like nothing too crazy.
Do you know what I looked into today? I looked into the equipment that Joe Rogan uses. It's
super
like
expensive.
It's like, it's definitely top notch, but the one mic is like $400.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's like more than this entire setup.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not more than that, but it's like, you get my point.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it's expensive stuff. It's called like a Z something, right? Or
I can't remember exactly what it's called,
nice
but
mic.
it's not a nice mic, it's the mic.
Yeah, it's the mic. Well, now you see like more upper echelon podcasts, they actually use that exact same mic.
Right.
So people have kind of caught on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, obviously in those scenarios, you're not going to have like the perfect lighting or the perfect camera angle. But I think what does bring a lot of value is the ability to kind of be out in the field, out in their element,
I think that's a very good point.
And having that kind of vibe to it, which I like. I like more of the rustic indie stuff. Like I don't do a whole lot of editing. I don't cut a whole lot out. It's kind of just free flowing.
I don't either. I like it very unnatural. And I tell people don't feel like you have to spit the first thing out of your mouth. Like, you need a second to gather your thoughts. That's fine. I can definitely cut it out, but I prefer to make it as unedited as possible. And usually people are pretty good about it. Like, the only thing I'll usually cut out is when I have to go restart the camera once it times out after a half hour. But usually I really don't edit too much, which is why I really like these podcasts, because it's just like a conversation. Like, I would have this conversation with you, whether there's a camera and lights or whether we're just sitting in my backyard.
Right. And I think podcasting, eventually there becomes like almost like an internal system that you develop. Right. And it seems really natural to the listener, but at the same time, you can almost flip like this little switch. Right. And all of a sudden you're in podcast mode. Right. So, I think there is an importance to having decent gear and having good setups, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to you. Yeah. And being that person, having listened to your podcast, you have that, but there's some people that just hasn't quite clicked yet. Yeah. And you'll notice, like, when I first started, I'm about almost 70 episodes. Yes, 70 episodes in now, and there's a few episodes that I haven't launched yet. But if you go back to episode number 1,
dude, I'm sure it's like not awful, garbage. But it's not compared to number 70.
We can say how it is.
Like that.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the content itself is great. Yeah. Right? Because what it does is it shows this evolution from episode 1 to episode 70. Right. So it's you can't really compare it to like TV or anything else, but it's as if like you were reading a book, right? And all of a sudden the first chapter starts out slow, kind of laying the groundwork. But then when you get to the end, you're like, oh, man, this is awesome. This is a great book. Right.
That's a great analogy. And it's kind of like that with everything. Like, if you go back and watch the first video I ever put on YouTube, terrible. Like, I was saying this to someone, like, the camera's, like, face down. Like, it's, like, all blurry. There's, like, a window in the background. Totally. Compare it to the video I just released today. Much better speaker, much better quality. Obviously, that came partially with the equipment. Obviously, I've come a long way as an editor. I've taught myself new things. But it really just takes time, and I don't think that's what people really understand about all these things that we do. Because if you have that scarcity mindset and you're just kind of looking at someone, like whoever it is, like they're nothing, then ultimately, if you have that same mindset, you are going to be nothing. Like, and Joe Rogan has said this best. He's like, I am the most disciplined, like, lazy person there is. And that's just basically what it comes down to, I feel like, just sticking with whatever you believe in and just having a long-term vision to it, as opposed to, like, okay, I didn't get famous after my first 5 videos, let me just quit.
Yep. Yeah, that's very, very true. And is, in a lot of ways, kind of hard to grasp for some people.
A lot of people, let's say.
Yeah, we can say that. And obviously there's things wax and wane, right? So like there's times when you're more consistent and times when you're less consistent. Of course. And that I think has to do a lot with like life in general, right? If you're obviously, this for me personally isn't a full-time job, although eventually I'd like to become there, and it is starting to get to a certain point, whether it's me getting contracted for other jobs, like I'm doing a gig tomorrow night and related to it, and or networking through other people. I think just having the chutzpah, if you will, to keep going at it day after day, week after week, month after month, and just making that post, making that podcast, writing a blog article, like just trying, and I think that's what it really comes down to is like, there's a quote that I've resonated with me when I was in college, and I was sitting at a powerlifting, because I think you remember I was in the powerlifting team. Yeah. Didn't you try?
I was there for a couple practices, and my schedule wasn't working out. I'm like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, I remember that. And, it was like, do today what others won't, so you can do tomorrow what others can't.
I literally just saw this the other day.
Yeah, it's a great quote.
Remember. I think I reposted it, but I did see this like very recently. That's ironic that you just said that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite ones. And another one would be like the man in the arena. So like those who step foot in the arena and put forth the effort, you know, can know no victory nor defeat, right? They're the ones that are in there. So if you're not actually trying, then you really can't say anything about, you know, what that person is doing.
I agree completely.
Right? So, you know, it's funny. So there was I don't know if I ever told this story, but, you know, I grew up and, you know, this is actually two stories, right? So I grew up, and while I was growing up, I had a speech impediment. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had to go to speech therapy and all these other places to try and fix my lisp. Right. So, you know, during that time period, it was super frustrating, right? It sucked, you know, but, you know, for my mom to have kept me going there and kept me in it, and now I don't have that list, right? And now I'm getting calls to do voiceovers professionally.
That's crazy.
And have a podcast that now I'm reaching, you know, a bunch of people, and have like built my own little business around. Yeah, you know, it's like, okay, you know, that's
what a way you've come.
That's
crazy. That's a great story.
That's how you that's how you like that's sticking through it, you know. And obviously, like in a lot of ways, you don't know where it's going to end up, right? But if you just keep going at it. Like, I had no idea that I would get onto a TV network and then eventually start working for that network. Right. But you just kept on doing it. You just kept on trying things and looking for some optimism when things were looking a little bit dreary, you know? And I had a guy who I don't really talk to anymore. But when I first started, I was like, dude, I want to have you on the show. Like, I think you'd make a great story. And he told me straight up, that podcast is a dumb idea. And it'll never work. I have no idea.
He didn't have a reason. You just said it was a dumb idea.
Yep. And then I would say about 4 months later, he calls me up and he's like, hey man, the podcast's been doing great. And I go, yeah.
You don't say, huh?
You don't say.
You schmuck.
Yeah, exactly. So he did not get invited on the show.
I didn't think so.
But it just goes to show you, like, people are going to be naysayers. People are going to do that. But it's because they're not persistent enough to go after their own thing. Right. You know? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of truth in what you said. And it's just that keep chipping away.
Yeah.
Chip.
And it's hard because I feel like when people start something, there's this like big, like essentially barricade in front of them. Like they have all these concerns. Maybe they're like a perfectionist, or maybe they're just nervous what their friend's going to think. And I guess the best advice that you can give someone is to just go do it. Which, I mean, didn't really do anything for me when I first started doing this. So I'm like, that doesn't help me. Like, how can I like get past it? But that's really what you have to do, is essentially just do it. Because no one else is going to do it for you. You have to go do it.
No one else will make progress unless you make progress.
Exactly.
And I associate that a lot to, weightlifting. Like, I compete in weightlifting, and no one's going to lift the bar for you. Right. A pound on the bar is not going to get lifted unless you lift the bar. Right. So, and you know that. I mean, you go to the gym, so like you just gotta keep trying. Yeah. So that's the one thing that I've learned through this whole process of creating a podcast, and then also looking into other avenues of, okay, well, I have this podcast, I have this audience, and all this value that I'm bringing to businesses, both big and small. Like, how can I bring them more value and kind of like put them at the forefront and put me making money like way, 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 way back. Right. Like, in no way do I think that a podcast by itself, can truly make you a millionaire. Right. It's the things you do with the network and the people around it that is where the value lies. The value lies in people. Like, the value doesn't lie just in the conversation.
Oh yeah, dude, absolutely, yeah.
So that's kind of been my, I guess you could say, mantra, like, around this whole thing. Is like, meet as many people as you can, pick their brains, and take that information and try and just give it away. Right.
So, what are some of those like pathways or avenues that you've like gone down and like worked on, or that you're thinking about working on to provide more value to your audience?
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting parts to it, because it really is what I see as a double-edged sword, right? Because you have, at one part of it, you have the consumer, right? So if you kind of look at the coastline, you have those who work and have businesses on the coastline, and then you have those that enjoy the coastline, right? And I happen to be both, right? Like, I'm a captain full time, but I also love going on my boat on my days off.
Right.
It's sick and twisted, but that's what I do. So for me, I looked at it 2 ways. I was like, okay, how can I provide value to businesses? Well, that comes in the form of like marketing. It comes in the form of promotion, collaborations, as well as creating this network, if you will, that businesses can come on board, they can sign up, and they can get access to the network of people. That's something that we're currently working on. And then from the consumer side of things, you know, all these brands, all these people are looking to sell their product at the end of the day. Right? Money makes the world go round. We got to sell goods, provide service. And so for me, it's kind of almost become like you ever heard of the brand Huckberry?
Oh, I have. Yeah.
It's the Huckberry came about in like 2000 and I want to say maybe 9 or 10.
Right.
It was created by these 2 guys. They were on a ski lift. They got this idea. They wanted to curate products for the heterosexual male ages 25 to 34. Like literally, you can go read an article about it. And they started with 10 grand. Basically, what they did is they curated products around the outdoors for that demographic. Right.
Okay.
In my opinion, they've totally lost their way. Like, it just doesn't resonate with a lot of people anymore.
Right.
I mean, it does because people sell stuff, but it doesn't resonate with me, right? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to provide story, but at the same time also provide someone a product that they might be interested in that they might not have heard of. Right? So providing them with like this curated coastal, I guess the word could be like, like the Kayak Center in Wickford.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, but online.
Gotcha.
If you would. So that's kind of the direction that we're going. It's becoming an e-commerce platform, and then also just monetizing the podcast through sponsorships and other stuff that, being a part of Waypoint TV, you can also monetize by just commercials and advertisement.
Right.
So, and that's a whole other thing that I'm learning all about is the advertising world and, how that works. So it's been interesting.
What have you learned so far?
That you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Right.
That is I would say that is
but that's
rule number one.
That's kind of a world in general.
Yeah.
But an audience is more valuable than you think.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see the amount of money that people are willing to pay to be a part of your audience.
Yeah.
And it's pretty phenomenal. Like there's guys like, Nick, who was on the podcast, who made a living with just representing brands.
Right.
And obviously he did a lot of things and there's a lot of work involved in that that people don't account for. But at the end of the day, like him shouting out Mark Bell Slingshot and showing a picture of him with a knee sleeve, I mean, that's a pretty badass way to make a living.
Yeah.
And that same thing can be applied to a podcast, right? So we're working on a few sponsors right now, making stuff look professional, like creating a really professional pitch deck.
Right.
And I saw you just swallowed that yawn.
Did you? I did.
So, but yeah, man, it's that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned is like your audience is valuable, no matter the size. Because I always put it in perspective as if 1,000 people listen to this podcast, right? Imagine walking into a room with 1,000 people.
It's a good way to look at it.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if 50 people listen to a podcast.
Right.
And you walk in a room with 50 people and you have to do a speech.
That's a good way to think of it. I've never thought of it like that. Because sometimes my videos will get 50 views or something like that. But I guess if you look at it from an aspect of walking into a room with 50 people, makes you feel a lot better about it, I'd say.
For sure.
Yeah.
But that's what matters. It's like, okay, because if I can resonate with those 50 people really, really well,
right,
then I'm making a difference. I'm making an impact. But if it's 1,000 people,
right,
or if it's 2 people, like you're still having that conversation. What I love about podcasting is you're taking a conversation, you're putting it into someone's ear, and you're seeing what comes out on the other side, and that tends to be more intimate than just a video.
It's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
You gotta be optimistic, man.
That is pretty, I've just never thought of it that way. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, and then you see these podcasters that are doing 40,000 downloads a month, or per episode, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's.
But they didn't get there overnight. That's the thing.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, they woke up and they
woke up. Yeah. They started one podcast.
Right.
Boom,
that was
that. That was it.
Yeah, Rogan, just one episode and he blew up.
Yeah, that's it.
That was it. Just one episode.
No, yeah, that's all it takes.
How many people work on this podcast with you?
You mean the team?
Yeah.
So there's Zach with a H, there's Zach with a K, there's Zachariah, there's 4 different Zachs.
You punking me?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's just me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you had a couple people that helped you out.
No, it's all me.
It's just you.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Why did you think that?
I don't know. I could have sworn I looked on the website and there was some other names on there.
Well, I do have someone that does copywriting.
Maybe that's what I saw. I can't remember who they were. I'll have to look it up once we get off of this.
Yeah, it might have been that. I mean, Katie, I found her up on Upwork, and it just so happens she's very similar in age. She's really into wildlife and conservation. And if Katie listens to this, you do an awesome job. So thank you. But she does a lot of editing.
Right.
So she went through the website and kind of edited some stuff for me. Any blog posts or stuff that I just kind of type up fast because I can be lazy like that. And I'll be like, Katie, look at this. And I'll send it off to her. Yeah.
It can be so easy to get lazy like that sometimes. It really can, especially when you're in just such a groove. I've noticed sometimes when I get like that, I really need to take a step back and just really look at it and be like, okay, is this work that I'm really proud to put out to people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, quality always, I think, to some degree trumps quantity.
Yeah.
But in no way are those interchangeable. You can't just think I'm going to produce one incredible video and then not produce another one for a month.
Yeah.
Right? There has to be that balance. And before I really got started in the podcast, I was doing 2 a week, and it was an incredible amount of work. But at the time, it was mid-COVID. I was, doing carpentry. So I wasn't working nearly as much as I am now. It was a 40-hour week job. Now I'm doing twice that, 3 times that. It's stupid. But, so I had more time, but the quality was definitely not there.
Right.
Now the quality is a lot higher.
Right.
But we're only doing 1 a week.
Yeah.
So I think there's a good balance.
Where do you find these guests?
Man, there's a mix. So the cool thing about creating this network has been the accumulation of guests through the network itself.
Right.
All of a sudden you get one guy who he's like, hey, my buddy has a company. Oh, let me try that. And all of a sudden they send me their contacts.
Right.
So, and I just got in touch with some companies that are relatively big. Luke's Lobster is one of them. They were on Guy Raz's podcast, How I Built This, which does 1 billion views a year or something like that. And then also a company called Nomadics Towels, which is pretty big. And then another one called Grundens, which is another pretty large company in the industry. And I know, I don't know, if you're not in the industry, it would be who cares, right?
Yeah.
But, a lot of it's through Instagram. A lot of it's through just, cross-pollination.
Right.
And then just me kind of just knowing companies that I've used.
Right.
And that I want to go and try out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the website, let's talk about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go about setting that up? Because I feel like you can go 2 ways with this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm having Ariana come on the podcast Wednesday.
Okay.
And hers was very intense. It seemed like she had to learn a lot of coding. She put a lot of work into it.
Ariana who?
Reardon, Nick's girlfriend.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, but it seems like she put a ton of work into it. So I'm actually really excited to hear about it and the coding languages she learned. But there's also websites like Wix where you can set up in probably a couple of hours.
Yep.
Which route did you go and how long did it take to set up?
So I am by no means someone who is naturally tech savvy.
Right.
I'm just too damn stubborn to not figure it out.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad quality to have, right?
So I'm going to figure it out one way or another.
Yeah.
And, if that means a backwards runaround way to do it until I can pay someone to do it, then that's how I'm going to do it. So, and I'm not going to do a hack by any means.
Right.
So what I did is I kind of weighed my options. I was like, okay, I can hire a friend of mine who his name's Alden. He's a great at anything techie. He builds apps for a living.
I think I know him.
Do you know Alden?
Alden Smith? Is that his last
Jenkins.
name? Jenkins. I know exactly who he is. Does he still live in Texas?
He does live in Texas.
That's what I thought.
Yep. And he lives in Austin right now. And Alden was like, dude, but you should learn coding. And I'm like, Alden, I don't have time to learn coding. So what I did is, I was looking at Squarespace, Wix, Shopify, and you can make a badass website that 99% of people wouldn't know the difference. And I personally use Wix, and then I'm currently merging over to Shopify as the e-commerce side of things kind of comes into play.
Gotcha.
But yeah, man, Wix, it's been great, and you can do some pretty cool stuff with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
and it's cheap.
Yeah. Is it free? Or some of them are free?
I think some. I don't know. I don't know enough to speak to it, but I think I pay like $200 a year.
So that's like not even bad. It's like less than $20 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like nothing.
No, it's not.
It's like a Spotify membership.
Yeah.
Now, is your podcast also on Spotify and Apple Music?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's everywhere. It's actually on Roku, Spotify, Samsung Plus TV, Vizio TV, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere.
Everything and anything.
Everything.
Now, is it on YouTube?
I have struggled to put it on YouTube.
Why?
It's just that other editing thing that I got to do, and I just have a lot going on. So, but it's something that I do mean to do, because a lot of the episodes that have gone on YouTube do well.
Yeah.
And they get those additional views, and I know that for a fact people like watching podcasts.
I'm like that.
Yeah.
That's why I put them on YouTube.
Interesting.
I say that to every single person that's come on this podcast and that has a podcast of their own. I say, you have to put it on YouTube.
Huh.
You absolutely have to put it on YouTube.
So you'll watch a podcast?
I always watch them.
Okay.
Unless I'm driving. Like even Rogan's podcast.
You don't watch the podcast while you're driving?
I try not to. I don't have that Tesla yet. But even when I listen to Rogan's podcast, assuming I'm not driving or I'm not running or anything like that, I'll always watch it on Spotify.
Interesting.
Always. I'll always. I'm listening to a podcast right now by Graham Stephan. I'm watching it. And sometimes I won't even watch it. Like, I'll have it on. I might not pay attention to it. I might be doing something else. Might be editing something.
Well, you have it on the
but
TV.
I'll have it on the TV every time.
Huh. Interesting.
And another thing that I've always said to people that come on this podcast, and a lot of people don't know this, it's much easier to grow an audience when you're posting video on YouTube. Even if you don't even post the video, even if you just put, like, along the keel, like, in the background and just have, all the audio run. YouTube has such a better algorithm than Spotify and Apple Music, because YouTube will push your content out to a new audience. Spotify and Apple Music, you have to go in and search for it. There's not really an algorithm for it.
Interesting.
So it's much harder to grow an audience that way.
Huh.
If you can, more power to you.
Yeah.
But if you can't, then YouTube's honestly a great tool to use.
Huh. All right. Noted. I learned something new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that, and I think that's why podcasts are very hard to grow to really exponential levels, because you have to somehow stumble across them on Spotify.
Yep.
And unless you're looking for something specific, and even if you're not that big, you have to find someone that's going deep. For example, if I started a fantasy football podcast today, right? And someone went on Spotify and typed in fantasy football, my podcast is not going to come up anywhere near the top. They'll have to go very deep down to get to me.
Right.
Very deep down.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, podcasting, it's notorious for that.
Yeah.
And not only finding podcasts, but also the analytics behind them.
Right.
I mean, everything. It's such a new and interesting platform, and it's not even that new. I mean, podcasts have been around for 2006, 2007. I mean,
not that long.
Not that long, right? I mean, they've been around longer than YouTube, and Apple being the first company to really push them. So I think within the past three-ish years, podcasts have really kind of been on the up and up, where you can pretty much ask anyone, have you ever listened to a podcast? And they'll say yes.
There's a podcast for everything too, and you can do it while doing anything. You can do it while running, driving, at the gym. Like, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, and that's why when Waypoint TV approached me, I was so in, because I knew I was going to learn and be able to collaborate with so many other people that are doing just that, and to some degree get involved in Waypoint itself. And now that's kind of come to fruition. So it's cool to be on both sides of it, like as a producer, but also as someone who's in the industry level. It's been really interesting to see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, with your work schedule, because you're working a lot of hours, do you ever feel like you're getting kind of burnt out or kind of weary, and you just want to throw your hands in the air and say, screw this?
The short answer would be no.
Really? That surprises me.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have a mission behind you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when you know what your why is, it's super, super powerful. Now, with that said, are there days where I'm like, man, this sucks, or I do not want to do this, or I'm being inconsistent with posting on my podcast or social media or anything, right?
Right.
Absolutely. I'm a human being. We're all human beings. Like, you're going to go through things are going to wax and wane.
Oh yeah,
right? Definitely. But I think long-term wise, like, is there ever been a moment where I'm like, this, like, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, I'll cut it out.
Damn it. Sorry, dude. I'm from New England. Like,
you're fine. No, you're fine.
Forgot to ask that. But to say that I was like, just want to like quit.
Can't say you have.
No, not really. I mean, maybe there's been a moment where I'm like, screw this. I don't want to do it. But like, to just straight up be like, no, I'm done. No, I can't say it. And I think that's just part of like my why. And my why has always been, growing up, my dad he was working all the time.
Right.
It was just constant. So, I only got to see him 2 days a week, maybe 1 day a week, right? During just my entire life.
Right.
I mean, people literally thought we were like a military family because my dad was just gone all the time.
Wow. What did he do for work?
He did pharmaceutical sales and whatnot. And I grew up, very happy with the way I grew up. Very fortunate. But, that takes a toll.
Yeah.
So there was one moment where my dad had bought a promotional items company called Image Plus. And basically, that was the first time I ever got to sit down and have dinner with my dad after school.
Wow.
Like, be able to come home and he's there. I was like, sweet, So from that moment on, I can literally picture it in my head the moment. And I was like, okay, this is what I have to do. Like, I have to own my own business. I have to make my own way, because you are what you manifest, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to manifest, freedom for your future, your family's future, X, Y, Z, then that's what you got to do.
Right.
So I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, I want to put in the time now so I can reap the benefit later.
I think that's an awesome way to look at it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what a lot of people understand, because obviously what society really preaches is you go to school, you get a job, and you work for someone that's essentially better than you, and they dictate your life, which really sucks, because if you want to like take some time off for whatever the reason, maybe you are burnt out, or maybe you want to go on like a month trip to Australia or something like that, essentially your boss has the right. I guess you also have the right, but I mean, if you don't have any other money, then he owns you. He can be like, oh, honey, no, you are not taking that trip to Australia. Oh, honey, no, you are not going to Europe for 2 weeks. Like, you'll be here Monday morning at 8:30.
Right.
And I don't think people understand that. And I understand there are more rewarding professions out there than working in a cubicle, let's say. I was talking about with one of my friends the other day, and because my ex-girlfriend's a teacher, and so was her mom. And we were talking about how we think being a teacher is a very, very rewarding profession. Because even if, like, say your principal isn't the best, like the vice principal is not that great, you still get to make a difference in all of those kids' lives one way or the other, regardless of whether they're kindergarten, first grade, or 11th and 12th grade. Like, you get to make a difference in some of those kids, at least, if not a lot of those kids' lives.
No, for sure.
But when you're working in a cubicle 8 to 5, you could easily, like, say if you work in finance, you could save the company $10 million, and your boss would be like, thanks, Georgie, run it back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Which really, really sucks.
Yeah, but I think, there's also, it would be, I think, irresponsible to make a blanket statement in some regard. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying but there are people out there that genuinely like doing that, and that's totally fine.
It definitely doesn't apply to every single human. I'm just saying, I don't even think it applies to the majority of people, because I don't think the majority of people understand that concept that I just threw out there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's sad to see that you can work 52 weeks out of the year and you only get 2.
It's crazy. I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
And then but you want to like leave early to go to a doctor's appointment, like take some time there. Oh, you're sick today? Oh, there's a little bit of time gone there. Right. It's like, so it's really not 2 weeks to do whatever you want. It's kind of like 2 weeks to do the life things, like go to the bank or go to the doctor.
Right.
Because why would they be open when you're not working? Why?
Right. And fortunately for me, my schedule is a little bit different than most people. I mean, being a captain, like the job that I have is, I work extremely hard during the summer, like, and spring, summer, and a little bit in the fall. Like, it's ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, I got up the other night at 3 a.m. to go do a call,
Wow.
and then got back to work the next day.
Wow.
Like, but that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
But I'm fortunate where, I make a decent amount of money where I'm like, okay, that's warranted.
Right.
But then for the rest of the year, the days that I have off, or the time that I'm not physically just working or on call, I can work on along the keel or with Waypoint or with other things that I'm involved in to help perpetuate that freedom down the road.
Right.
So, and yeah, man, there's something to be said about, like, I don't know, in my head I'm like, man, I'm putting in the work. Like, I'm putting in the work. Like,
it's a good feeling. Like, sometimes, and that's why I've really cut back the content I've been putting out, because originally I was doing 3 videos a week. That got very hard and stressful. So I went down to 2, and then I went down to 1. I was just putting a lot of work into that 1 video. And then I started with the podcast. So I guess, including the podcast, I got 2 videos going. But it can be tough, and it can really take its toll on you over time. But then as soon as I have those thoughts about, like, maybe this isn't worth it, maybe I should just, take the simple route and just live like everyone else and just work, at a desk for the next 40 years, I think, what would I do with that time? Like, I'm just like, what would I do? It's like, I would probably find things to do, but I'm like, I've never been someone to play video games. I've never been someone to really sit and watch Netflix. Like, I'm kind of like, end of the night, like maybe a YouTube video here to, like, wind down type of guy, or maybe even read a book. Like, I'm more into that. I'm just like, what would I do with all this time? And people who say they don't have time, I just look at them and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, really, what are you doing with your time? Because if you're sitting there watching 4 or 5 Netflix episodes a night, you've got the time, sweetie. You have the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely times where I've, indulged in just, like, this cool, there's, like, this Netflix show that, at the end of the night, I'll get back from work, and a lot of times you're so worked up on adrenaline that, like, you can't go right to bed.
Oh, there's definitely nothing wrong with doing that. I'm just saying, those people that are like, do that
nightly,
7 nights over 7 nights, and they're just like, I don't have any time. It's like, you literally just spent half of a workday watching Netflix.
Right.
What are you talking about? You don't have the time.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And, man, I don't know, because since I was a kid, I was always like lemonade stand, coffee. Like, I would sit out on the street corner on Sundays and sell coffee. Yeah. And I was living in Florida. So, like, it's mowing lawns. Like, I had a cricket business where I grew crickets. Yeah.
How'd that work? Can you talk about that a little bit? Do you remember?
Yeah, of course. It was called Crickets Ahoy. I had business cards made up.
Did you really? How old were you?
Man, I was maybe 10.
Oh my God, dude! I wouldn't even know where to start with that at 10 years old. Like,
and yeah, I had 2 geckos, and these things needed crickets. And I was like, why am I going to Petco and paying, like, $3 for a thing of crickets? But if you put them in a tank, the crickets will populate themselves. Right. So all of a sudden, I started breeding crickets, and I was sounds so stupid, but I would package them up and sell them to people in the neighborhood, because we had a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and a lot of them had geckos and lizards and
schmucks.
And instead of them going to Petco, I would sell them crickets, and I'd pedal my bike over with a little bag and sell them crickets.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't think I made anything with them, but, like, to be able to make like $10 when you're 10 or like 20,
that's
$20
a lot.
A year, you're like, this is great,
Especially because you don't have to spend money ever when you're 10 years old.
No,
like,
and I think my dad was like, you put it in the bank, and I like had a temper tantrum or something. Like
probably something like that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, man, there's always been like, being at school, like, I was always hustling for work, like cutting lawns. When the snow would come and people were going to sled in, I was shoveling driveways. Like, it's just kind of like in my DNA,
I've always been the same way. I've always been someone that's just like, all right, I have, this day off. How can I make money? How can I work to further myself? Mm-hmm. And eventually what ended up happening was I got burnt out. Mm-hmm. and I really had to do a deep dive, and I really thought, what's the best place for my time to make me the most money, not only in the short term, but more so over the long term? Because obviously short term, it's just work every single day.
Right.
But long term, it's like that's, at one point my body's going to give out. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but 30 or 40 years down the road, it's probably going to give out at some point. So I couldn't be putting all those hours in, and I knew that. And so that's when partially that's where this inspiration for this YouTube channel, this podcast came in, because I thought that was a very unique route to go down, something I could do very well with.
Yeah, I like it, man. I like the idea of helping people through finance, and that's something that, as I've kind of gotten older, like gotten more and more interested in being able to have your money work for itself.
Right.
And we were talking before this whole thing, we got started when I first came in, you're very much into the stocks, you know, and, as I'm kind of, been working a lot, I'm like, all right, well, what can I do? So my goal is to get a duplex and kind of start that real estate game. Hopefully, sooner rather than later.
Now, do you want to rent out one side, or do you just want like the property and just see the appreciation from it?
No, I'll definitely rent out one side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely rent out. Hopefully get that. I'm not quite sure the direct route of purchasing yet.
Right.
It might be through an FHA loan, or, putting out an X amount of money down.
Right.
Whether I'm going to put 20% down, or and not accrue the PMI insurance, or put a little less down and then get it back with equity, sweat equity into the house. Like, not 100% sure on that part yet. Yeah. But I know for a fact that I'll be buying a duplex and renting one side out. And
that's what I've always said, and I just haven't done it. But I think and this just applies to me. I wouldn't recommend other people do this, I guess, but I think this is a very applicable idea if you're really willing to put in a lot of work. I would rather just honestly rent like I do now. Depends on a lot of things. Like, depends on the deal, how much you're paying, the area, long-term plans. Like I was telling you, I have a desire to move down to Texas one day.
Yeah, you did.
So if I decide to do that, next 2 or 3 years, why would I want to buy a house up here? I mean, could potentially, with this market, how being so crazy, could potentially still make money and turn out a profit.
Right.
But I don't even know if I want that headache.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. Like you said, you're definitely getting a headache when you buy a piece of property, but it's like, all right, you're gonna have to pay rent anyway. So why not pay rent and own it, than pay rent and not?
Yeah, like I said, it all depends. It's kind of like if you plan on staying here on Island for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and you're like, this is it, this is where I want to be, then okay, makes sense. I know me personally, I change my mind once a day. Like, legitimately once a day. Like, I change my mind all of the time. Yeah. So I don't know if that's like, if you had to ask me 5 years ago, like, Josh, do you want to move out of Rhode Island? I would have laughed at you for even asking me that question. If you had told me 5 years ago, like, Josh, do you have any interest in the stock market? I would have been like, I don't need the stock market, or I would have said something like ignorant or arrogant like that. So I changed my mind, and as I continue to grow, there's different pathways I want to go down. So I don't know if that's the best for me personally, but what I was going to say is I feel like I can just grow my money in the stock market a lot faster than I can in real estate.
Oh, for sure.
So I'd rather essentially pay the rent as an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And then just grow my money through the stock market.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I mean, there's so many different ways to, there's so many different ways to skin a cat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, there's millionaires in the stock market. There's millionaires in the real estate game. There's so many ways to do it.
I think that's what's so cool about it is, like, there's so many different strategies that are proven that work. It just, like, literally depends on which one that you want to pursue. And although that's awesome, I feel like it's also intimidating in a way. And I think that might be kind of one of the reasons why more people don't take advantage of it. Because if you told someone, if you invest in the stock market, you're going to be a millionaire and do nothing else, more people may be attracted to that idea. But there's stocks, there's real estate, there's all these different avenues. It's like, which one do I potentially buy into? Which one's the best place for my money? And your head starts spinning. People get overwhelmed, and they're like, forget it, I'm done with this.
Yeah. I think the reason why I'm so attracted to the real estate game is, I've met a lot of people that have done it and have been successful in it. Yeah. And also, I like projects. Right. I like working with my hands.
Yeah, you were saying that.
So for me to, like, put up a fence or, do some sort of, like, siding or put down a floor, like,
it's fun.
It's fun. I enjoy that.
That's the important thing.
Yeah. So, that's part of it too. And then also like, it might just be me being simple-minded, but like tangible. You know? Like I can't touch a stock. Like I know it's there. I know the value of like, if I buy Nike stock, right. And like the Nike shoes, but like, I don't know.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like I can step on a piece of property. It's just like numbers on a
computer.
Yeah, it's like that tree is my tree.
Plus, like real estate's more of a necessity, I guess you can say. Like you need a place to live.
You need a place to live.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I do understand it from that point, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think, stock, real estate, whatever route you're going to go, it's better than not going.
Yeah. I was talking with this about Dave Schumacher at one point.
Oh, yeah, I know Dave.
Yeah, he bought a duplex and he rents out one side.
Oh,
we're kind of going back and forth, like friendly debate. And like about like real estate, stocks, which one's better, which one's more efficient. And we ultimately came to the conclusion, like, they're both good. Like, there's a place for both of them in society. It just depends on personal preference.
Yeah, and I think, at some point in time, you will probably own a house.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So, and at some point in time, I own stock right now.
Yeah.
Right? So they go hand in hand. It just depends on what bucket you want to fill first.
Yeah.
Or how much you want to fill it.
I've said openly on this podcast, on my YouTube channel several times, I will definitely have a few houses. I'll definitely be a real estate investor in the future. Mm-hmm. I just don't have a desire to do that yet.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to look at it. It's like, okay, there's, I want to invest my time, because a lot of it comes down to time too,
exactly. Yeah, that's another thing.
Stock market, you can do it from your computer.
Yeah. You can do
real
it
estate when you're starting out is a little bit more on scene.
Yeah, you might not be willing to hire like a property manager just yet or anything like that, because that can definitely be a lot. I feel like to go from renting to homeowner to hiring a property manager all within, say, like 6 months.
Right.
Like, I feel like that can definitely be overwhelming, and that can be a lot on your plate, assuming you're still running a business or you're still working a full-time job and you're not just sitting there doing nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see, man. We're, hopefully come springtime, everyone's like, oh, the market. If there's a deal, there's a deal.
There's always a deal to be found. There's always a diamond in the rough. That is what I have learned.
Yep. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking for, and that might be ignorant in my, in my lack of knowledge around the topic, but from everything I've learned, I listened to the podcast Bigger Pockets. You ever heard of that one before?
Oh yeah, I used to listen to them a lot. I haven't recently, but I used to listen to them every Thursday when they came out. That was the first thing. Every Thursday.
Yeah, they're great. I love them, and I wax and wane like I haven't listened to Joe Rogan in like months, but last week I listened to one on, I don't know, I think it was like recovery and whatnot. It was great. But yeah, recently I've been getting back into the Bigger Pockets podcast, and that one's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
So yeah, always learn a lot. There was one guy who talked specifically on this market, and then he is also one of the investors with the guy from Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Right.
Have you read that book before?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, great book. So anyone who hasn't read that book, definitely go
10
read
out of 10 book.
10
definitely.
out of 10 book.
That's more than a real estate book. That'll change your whole mindset about money.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic book.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of puts in perspective of like, the ways to make money is to utilize the money that you already have.
I actually thought that book was a little overrated, to be honest with you. But I said that for a while, and I went back and I thought about it, and I think that's because I had read so many books before that tell similar things. So you pick up, I feel like from all these finance books, you pick out like, a piece here, a piece there, a piece of this, like you learn. But I feel like a lot of them are reiterating the same thing. So I think because I read so many finance books before I got to that, I was like, this book's overrated. So obviously I can't do this, but I really wish I could go back in time, like wipe my memory clean and read that book first and see how I would, I guess, think of it then.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, for me, like having this podcast and having worked alongside a lot of entrepreneurial people and talking to entrepreneurs and business owners and picking their brains, and getting, if you will, walking. There was a great analogy of one guy that was on the show. He's like, before his business that he opened up, which is a chair company, huge chair, called Park It, really cool brand. He was a marketing guy, so he literally went through tons of different companies and was looking under the hood, right? So he's like, it was as if I was at the Daytona 500 and looking under the hood of every single race car and then building the best race car I could build.
Nice.
And like, if you look at his brand, it emulates a lot of the brands that he worked with, like Oakley, Quicksilver, all these other like very California type brands. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of what Along the Keel has become, is like this podcast, like you going and reading all these books and then picking a piece out of each one. And then for me, it's been like, all right, I'm going to interview all these great brands that I admire.
Right.
And then I want to pick a piece out of each one's book and be like, I can utilize this.
Yeah.
You know, but then at the same time, give it to other people.
Right.
You know, so, and at least that's the hope. It's like if someone were to listen from episode 1 to 70, or, you know, obviously as we get more episodes, not only will we see an evolution of the podcast, but also this, you know, this database of all these people that have just gone on a limb and tried it.
Right. Just like consistent like value along the way, basically, more or less.
For sure. Yeah. And it's like the same lessons that you learn in creating a podcast and a business around it are the same lessons that I've learned from the guests that have been on the show.
Right.
So it's a very weird juxtaposition.
Right. Now, how difficult was it for you to start that podcast? Because I know you said you aren't overly technologically inclined. So is that hard to get that up and running, do the research for the mics and the interface and all that stuff? Or was it relatively easy?
I would say it was a lot of Google, right? YouTube University.
Yeah. YouTube.
And then...
Why you?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Who needs to go to URI? Yeah. And a lot of it was spending money. Yeah. You know, like you gotta... there was a guy on the podcast who I'm going to be seeing tomorrow night, and he says, you know, if you're gonna do it, you gotta put money on the table. Yeah. If you're gonna go for your dream, if you truly want it, put money on the table.
Yeah, like look at Rogan, like we were talking about. Like he's not running that as a skeleton operation. I mean, he kind of is, because it's just him and Jamie that do it, right? And the guest. But at the same time, like that's the best equipment. Like you listen to all those podcasts, there's never anything that's really cut out. There's never like an audio mislapse. It's like top-notch quality.
Yeah, it's really nice.
And you take that for granted. That's the crazy thing you do.
It goes unnoticed, but at the same time it is noticed, right? Yeah. Because at a certain point there's like this tipping point where it's like, okay, am I going to commit to this? You know? And I think once you put like a good amount of money into it and you're like, oh shit, okay, I'm going to commit. Then you're almost inclined to keep going. Right. And it's kind of like you're putting yourself in a rock and a hard place. Yeah. Right? Forcefully, but in a good way.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know? So, you know, when I first started, it was, you know, a $25 mic on Amazon, and literally like hunched over on a Zoom meeting. And I think I invested in this software. It was like $12. It was like, it was made in London, so like I paid in pounds. That's funny. Right? And I was living in Hawaii, and I was hunched over my desk, and it was like, you know, early in the morning or late at night, because it was a 6-hour difference from the mainland, and you just made it happen. And then over time, like I started researching different mics, and like as I got more and more serious, I invested more money. And like, you know, then when I got involved with Waypoint, I kind of knew and learned what worked and what didn't. You know, and I picked their brains because they'd been doing this for, you know, years and years and years. So, and that's been kind of cool, right? So I can kind of lean on them for questions, and then they can kind of lean on me for questions and stuff. And yeah, you know, one of the mics that I have now that I use for all my in-person stuff is an Audio Technica like headset mic. Right. And I have a Rodecaster Pro. But before that, I started out with a Zoom H6. Like, you know, just you kind of accrue equipment, and they all have their certain place. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just get rid of this one, but I'm just going to keep it.
Just keep it, just in case. I'll never use it, but just in case.
Yeah, but now I do. You know, like I was on the boat the other day, and you know, I brought my Zoom H6 because it's a little pocket recorder. Yeah. And I was doing voiceovers in my truck and on the boat, like, with my headset. But I said I was going to get rid of it. Yeah. But now I can work and work. You know what I mean? So like over time, I kind of like accrued all this equipment, and like one of the mics, the Audio Technica one, I actually screenshotted the YouTube video, a podcast that I watch and listen to, and like zoomed in to see that microphone, because I kept DMing him and asking like, hey, what mic is that? Hey, what mic is that?
No answer.
No answer. Right. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get creative.
Yeah, right.
So I took a picture, I zoomed in, I'm like, Audio Technica. and then I figured it out, and then I bought like 3 of them. But yeah, and then all the other stuff, just figuring it out. Yeah. Figuring out what works. It's what works for me. Yeah. You know, because what works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for the other guy. So that's kind of the big thing is, you know, building out a system that works for what I'm doing. Right. You know?
Now, the big question here, you don't do this full time.
No.
Do you see the day in the near future where that will be achievable, reachable? And when do you think that will be?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the goal, right? Yeah. It's like, or to some extent, you know, to maybe it's not a full-time thing. Right. Maybe it's this makes a great amount of money, but I still want to do something. Right. You know, like I'll always have a need to work on the water. Sure. You know, it's just like who I am.
Yeah, that's your thing.
But yeah, man, like if the e-commerce side starts picking up and this and the podcast, and I want it to be a epicenter for all things coastal. So if you like fishing, boating, kayaking, surfing, water skiing, like whatever it is, you know, like I want someone to be able to peek into how I grew up as a person, you know, and have the opportunity for them to do it, you know, like that's kind of the goal behind it.
Now, when you have the e-commerce set up and running, do you think you'd ever consider something like maybe someone who's just getting into fishing, maybe just wanting to get on the water? Do you think you'd put up a package where they can essentially pay you and you'll take them out?
I mean, like a charter? Yeah. So I've done charters in the past.
Yeah.
No.
Not your thing?
No.
Because I know Chad Mendez has a thing. I think it's relatively new. Do you know who that is? UFC fighter. He used to fight UFC, yeah. But he has a thing. He's very into hunting, very big hunter. Mm-hmm. He has a thing where you can go on his website and you can pay him and he'll take you out hunting.
Oh, okay.
He's
so
taken he's taken complete yellow guys out there, like never been hunting before, and he'll teach them how to hunt. Yeah. And I'm like, that's a pretty cool service. Obviously, Chad Mendez, it's a big name. A lot of people know who he is, even if they don't know him too well. They know the name, they know his history. So his clientele is much more demanding than say like ours is.
Right. I mean,
but it's still a cool idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and you know, guiding definitely has its place. And I've done guiding. I've taught people how to run boats. I've, you know, whether it be here in Rhode Island or out in Hawaii. Right. It's fun, but it's a demanding gig.
I bet it is.
You know, because you're pretty much trying to create the best scenario possible for that person. Right. And it's fun. Meet a lot of great people. But yeah, I don't know. I'd rather make money in my sleep than have to go. If I'm going to go fishing, I want to go fishing.
That's fair.
I don't want to take.
You don't want to teach someone how to fish. That makes sense. Yeah. That's funny. Anyway, man, thanks so much for coming on. This is a lot of fun. I had a great time sitting here and catching up with you. And maybe you can even come on again sometime since we found out you live right down the street.
I'm right down the street. You let me know.
Guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. If you got any sort of value out of this, make sure to like, subscribe, download if you're listening to this on Spotify and Apple Music. And I'll see you guys in the next one.